The gunshot echoed through the valley like distant thunder, sending a flock of startled birds into the crimson sunset sky as Piper Calloway clutched her bleeding shoulder and stumbled into the small mining town of Redemption Creek, Colorado, 1878. Pain seared through her body, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her heart, the betrayal still fresh, the memory of her father's lifeless eyes haunting her every step. She had traveled hundreds of miles to escape her past, only to find that some ghosts follow no matter how far you run. Piper collapsed against the weathered post outside the general store, her vision blurring as townsfolk began to gather. Her tattered dress was caked with dust and blood, her once elegant hat long lost to the merciless western terrain. 3 days on horseback with little food and water had taken their toll, but she'd made it barely. "Someone fetch the doctor," a woman's voice called out. "She's one of them bandits, I tell you," a gruff man countered. "Look at them fancy clothes under all that dirt." Piper tried to speak, to explain she wasn't who they thought, but darkness crept into the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw before consciousness slipped away was a tall figure pushing through the crowd, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, his eyes the color of a stormy sky. When Piper awoke, she found herself lying on a clean bed in an unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, casting dappled patterns across a simple wooden floor. Her shoulder was bandaged, the pain dulled to a persistent throb. "Finally decided to join the living, I see." The voice was deep, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. Piper turned her head to find a man seated in a chair by the window, cleaning a revolver with practiced hands. He was perhaps 30, with a face weathered by sun and wind, dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and those same storm-colored eyes she'd glimpsed before fainting. "Who are you?" she asked, her throat dry as desert sand. He set aside his gun and poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "Name's Noah Blackwood. Most folks around here call me Black." He approached the bed and helped her drink. "Doc Jenkins patched you up. Bullet went clean through. You're lucky." "Lucky," Piper repeated bitterly, sinking back against the pillows. "I wouldn't exactly call it that." Noah studied her with a piercing gaze that seemed to strip away pretense. "You got a name, miss?" She hesitated. Using her real name could be dangerous if word reached the wrong ears. "Piper." "Piper Smith." His mouth quirked in a half-smile that suggested he knew she was lying. "Well, Miss Smith, you caused quite a stir riding into town half-dead on a stolen horse with a bullet in your shoulder." "It wasn't stolen," she protested, then caught herself. "At least, not by me." "That's so." He leaned back in his chair. "Sheriff's mighty interested in your story. Says a woman matching your description was seen leaving the scene of a bank robbery in Silver Creek, about 2 days' ride from here." Panic fluttered in Piper's chest like a trapped bird. "I didn't rob any bank. She stopped, unsure how much to reveal. "You were what?" Noah prodded. "Running," she admitted quietly. "Just running." Noah studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "Rest up. Sheriff Mason will want to talk to you when you're stronger, but I convinced him to give you a day or two." He stood and moved toward the door. "You're in my sister's boarding house. Don't try leaving town small, nowhere to hide, and that wound needs time to heal." "Why are you helping me?" Piper asked. Noah paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Let's just say I know what it looks like when someone's running from something worse than the law." With that enigmatic statement, he left, the door closing firmly behind him. Piper lay back, her mind racing. She'd been certain her journey would end in Redemption Creek, that she'd find safety here with her mother's old friend, Margaret Wilson. But now, with the law suspicious and her strength depleted, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Outside the window, she could hear the sounds of the small mining town wagon wheels on dirt roads, the distant clang of metal from the blacksmith, voices calling out greetings. Normal, everyday sounds that seemed to belong to another world entirely, a world she'd never truly been part of. 3 days later, Piper was strong enough to sit on the porch of the boarding house, wrapped in a shawl borrowed from Noah's sister, Rebecca. The young widow had been kind but cautious, clearly taking her cues from her brother regarding their mysterious guest. Piper watched the townspeople go about their business, noting how many nodded respectfully toward Noah as he crossed the street from the sheriff's office. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his skin, his gait suggesting he could spring into action at any moment. Not for the first time, she wondered what his story was, what had brought him to this remote town, and why he'd taken an interest in her fate. "Sheriff says you're free to move about town," Noah announced as he climbed the porch steps. "But he's keeping an eye on you until your story checks out." "And what story is that?" Piper asked, her fingers nervously pleating the shawl's fringe. Noah settled into the chair beside her. "The one where you're Piper Calloway, daughter of Judge Emmett Calloway of Boston, and you're running from your father's murderers who framed you for his death and a subsequent bank robbery." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if reciting a shopping list rather than the painful details of her life. Piper's blood ran cold. "How did you? Telegram came this morning from the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver. They've been looking for you." He handed her a folded paper. "Not to arrest you, to protect you." With trembling hands, Piper unfolded the telegram. It contained a brief message confirming her identity and requesting she be kept safe until a marshal could arrive. "I don't understand. How did they know I was innocent?" Noah's expression softened slightly. "Your father's housekeeper survived the attack. She told them everything, how the Hargrove gang killed the judge when he refused to drop charges against their leader, how they tried to force you to open your father's safe, how you escaped." Relief washed over Piper like a cleansing rain. For weeks, she'd been running, convinced the whole world believed her guilty. "So, I'm free to go?" "Not exactly." Noah's gaze was direct. "The Hargroves are still looking for you. The marshal wants you to stay put until he arrives next week." Piper's momentary relief evaporated. "Next week? But I can't stay here. If they find me, they won't." Noah interrupted firmly. "No one knows you're here except the sheriff, my sister, and me. And we aim to keep it that way." Piper studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Blackwood? What's your stake in this?" Something flashed in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or recognition. "Let's just say I've seen what the Hargroves can do. 5 years ago, they killed my wife when I was tracking them for the Pinkertons." He stood abruptly. "Dinner's at 6. Rebecca's making stew." He left her on the porch with her thoughts, the weight of his revelation settling over her like a heavy blanket. She wasn't the only one carrying ghosts. The days passed slowly in Redemption Creek. Piper's shoulder healed, and she began helping Rebecca with chores around the boarding house to earn her keep. The work was unfamiliar to a judge's daughter raised with servants, but she found unexpected satisfaction in the simple tasks: washing dishes, sweeping floors, even learning to bake bread under Rebecca's patient instruction. Noah came and went, sometimes disappearing for a day or two on what he called ranch business. He owned a small spread outside town, she learned, though Rebecca confided that he spent more time helping the sheriff than tending cattle. He was different before Sarah died, Rebecca told Piper one evening as they sat shelling peas on the back porch. Laughed more. Had plans for the future. Now he just exists. She sighed. "I keep hoping he'll find something or someone to live for again." Piper thought of the quiet, watchful man who'd saved her life. There was something compelling about Noah Blackwood, something that drew her despite his gruff exterior. But she was in no position to think about such things. Once the marshal arrived, she'd move on, perhaps to San Francisco, where her mother's cousin lived. She'd start over, far from the memories and dangers of the East. A week passed, then 2, with no sign of the promised marshal. Noah grew increasingly tense, checking for telegrams daily, riding the perimeter of town, as if expecting trouble. Piper's anxiety mounted with each passing day. "Something's wrong," she told Noah as they walked back from the general store, her arms laden with supplies. "He should have been here by now." Noah nodded grimly. "I sent a wire yesterday. No response yet. What if the Hargroves intercepted the original telegram? What if they know I'm here?" The fear that had briefly subsided came rushing back. "Then we'll deal with it," Noah replied, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his hip. "But I don't think that's what happened. More likely the marshal got held up with other business." They turned the corner onto the main street, and Noah suddenly went rigid beside her. Piper followed his gaze to three riders tethering their horses outside the saloon, dusty, hard-looking men whose very posture spoke of danger. "Get back to the boarding house," Noah said quietly, taking the packages from her arms. "Use the back way. Stay there until I come for you." "Who are they?" Piper whispered, though she already suspected the answer. "Trouble," was all he said, giving her a gentle push toward a side alley.
"Go. Now."
Heart pounding, Piper slipped away, keeping to the shadows as she made her way back to the boarding house. Through an open window, she heard one of the men asking the barkeep about a Boston girl, dark hair, traveling alone. Her blood ran cold. They'd found her. Rebecca was out visiting a sick friend when Piper burst into the boarding house. Frantically, she gathered her few belongings, stuffing them into a small carpet bag. She needed to leave, to draw the danger away from the people who'd shown her kindness. But how far could she get on foot, with the Hargrove men's horses fresh and ready? The back door opened and Piper whirled, clutching a fireplace poker. Noah slipped inside, his expression grim. "It's them," he confirmed. "Three of the Hargrove gang, asking questions all over town. Won't be long before someone points them this way." "I have to leave," Piper insisted. "I won't put you and Rebecca in danger." "And go where?" Noah challenged. "They'd run you down before you made it 5 miles. He moved to the window, peering through the curtains. "We need to get you somewhere safe until we figure this out." "There is nowhere safe," Piper argued, desperation edging her voice. "Not from them. My father tried to bring them to justice, and they killed him in his own home." Noah turned to face her, determination hardening his features. "My ranch. It's defensible, isolated. We can hold out there if needed." "And Rebecca?" "She'll be safer at her friend Martha's place on the other side of town. I'll send word." He moved to a cabinet and extracted a shotgun and ammunition. "Can you ride?" Piper nodded.
"Yes, but no but."
"We leave in 5 minutes." Out the back, through the livery stable. His tone brooked no argument. As they slipped out the back door, Piper realized that in the space of a few short weeks, her fate had become entwined with this taciturn cowboy's. Whether that would prove to be her salvation or her undoing remained to be seen. The ride to Noah's ranch was tense and silent, both of them scanning the horizon for pursuers. They kept to less traveled paths, winding through stands of pine and across shallow creek beds. By the time the small ranch house came into view, the sun was setting, painting the sky in dramatic strokes of orange and purple. "It's not much," Noah said as they approached the weathered 2-story structure. "But it's solid." Piper took in the modest homestead, the main house, a barn, corral, and a few outbuildings, all nestled in a small valley with mountains rising behind. A stream gurgled nearby, and wildflowers dotted the surrounding meadow. Despite the circumstances, she found it beautiful. "You live here alone?" she asked as they dismounted. "Just me and a ranch hand, Miguel. He's probably out checking the north pasture." Noah led the horses to the barn. "He'll be back by nightfall." Inside the house, Piper was surprised by the simple comfort. The main room held a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and bookshelves filled with volumes that suggested a mind more cultivated than Noah's rough exterior implied. A pair of spectacles sat atop an open copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. "You read Dumas?" she asked, picking up the book. Noah looked almost embarrassed. "Sarah loved books. Started me reading them, too." He moved to the fireplace, arranging kindling and logs. "You can take the bedroom upstairs. I'll bunk down here." As darkness fell, Noah lit lamps and built a fire while Piper prepared a simple meal from supplies they'd brought. They ate mostly in silence, the weight of their situation hanging between them. "What will you do?" Piper finally asked. "After the marshal comes and takes me away?" Noah stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers. "Same as I've been doing. Run the ranch. Help the sheriff when needed." "Is that enough?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His eyes met hers, unexpectedly vulnerable. It was, until recently. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Noah stood abruptly. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next move." Upstairs, Piper lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the night sounds, the creak of the house settling, the distant howl of a coyote, Noah's footsteps as he checked doors and windows. For the first time since her father's murder, she felt something like safety. But she knew it was an illusion. As long as the Hargroves hunted her, nowhere was truly safe. Yet something else nagged at her consciousness, the way Noah had looked at her across the table, as if seeing something worth protecting, worth fighting for. It stirred feelings she'd thought long buried after her disastrous engagement to Frederick Winslow back in Boston. Frederick, who'd cared more for her father's connections than for her, who'd abandoned her at the first sign of scandal. Noah Blackwood was nothing like Frederick. He was hardened by life, by loss, yet there was a core of decency in him that tragedy hadn't erased. And despite everything, Piper found herself drawn to him in ways that both comforted and frightened her. Dawn broke with a shotgun blast that sent Piper bolting upright, heart hammering. She grabbed her dress, pulling it on as she rushed to the window. In the early morning light, she could make out Noah standing on the porch, shotgun raised, and 3 riders approaching slowly, hands raised in apparent surrender. Piper quickly pinned up her hair and hurried downstairs, pausing at the foot of the stairs to listen. "That's far enough," Noah was saying. "State your business." "Easy, friend," a smooth voice replied. "We're just looking for someone. A young woman, might have passed through town." "Nobody here but me and my ranch hand," Noah answered. "And I don't appreciate uninvited guests at daybreak." Piper's hands trembled as she recognized the voice. Cole Hargrove, the youngest of the brothers, the one who'd held a knife to her throat while his brothers ransacked her father's study. The one who'd promised to find her, no matter how far she ran. "Heard tell in town that you've been harboring a pretty little fugitive," Cole continued. "Judge's daughter, who robbed a bank after killing her own pa. There's a nice reward for her safe return to justice." "You heard wrong," Noah replied evenly. "Now turn around and ride out, or the next shot won't be a warning." A tense silence followed, broken by a different voice, deeper, more authoritative. "You're making a mistake, Blackwood. We know who you are, former Pinkerton who couldn't protect his own wife. You really want to die for some girl you barely know?" Noah's response was cold as winter. "You've got 5 seconds, Hargrove." 1. "This isn't over," Cole called as hoofbeats indicated their retreat. "We'll be watching. And when we find her, and you'll regret getting involved." The door opened and closed, and Noah's boots sounded on the wooden floor. Piper stepped out from her hiding place, her face pale. "They know I'm here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah's expression was grim. "They suspect, but they don't know for certain. Someone in town must have talked." "It's too dangerous for you," Piper insisted. "I should leave, draw them away from here." "And go where?" Noah challenged. No, the best plan is to stay put, keep you out of sight until the marshal arrives. And if he doesn't come? Piper asked the question that had been plaguing her. Noah's jaw tightened. Then I'll take you to Denver myself. Miguel returned mid-morning, a stocky Mexican with a weathered face and quiet competence. Noah briefed him on the situation, and the older man nodded solemnly. I will watch the south approach, he said. They will not surprise us again. Days passed in tense vigilance. Noah and Miguel took turns patrolling the property, while Piper remained inside, helping with cooking and mending to keep her hands and mind occupied. She learned that Miguel had worked for Noah's family since Noah was a boy, and had stayed loyal through all the hardships that followed. He is not the same since Senora Sarah died, Miguel confided one afternoon as they prepared dinner. But since you came, I see something different in his eyes. A purpose. Piper felt her cheeks warm. He's just doing his duty. Once the marshal comes, Miguel shook his head.
No, señorita.
Noah Blackwood does nothing from duty alone. He has chosen to protect you because he sees something worth protecting. The older man smiled gently. As do I. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a rare moment of relaxation in their vigilance, Piper found the courage to ask Noah about his past. How did you become a Pinkerton agent? Noah was silent so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, My father was a lawman in Texas. Taught me to shoot, to track, to read people. After he was killed by cattle rustlers, I drifted for a while, then joined the Pinkertons. Met Sarah during a case in Denver. She was a schoolteacher. A small smile touched his lips at the memory. Smartest woman I ever knew. She saw something in me worth saving when I was at my lowest. How did you end up here? Piper asked softly. After Sarah died, I couldn't stay with the Pinkertons. Too many memories. My sister Rebecca had settled here with her husband, so I bought this place. Thought I might find some peace. He glanced at her. What about you? What was life like as a judge's daughter in Boston? Piper looked out at the darkening landscape. Confined. Predictable. My father had my whole life mapped out: the right school, the right friends, the right husband. She twisted her hands in her lap. He wasn't a bad man, just rigid in his expectations. My mother died when I was 12, and afterward, he became even more determined to ensure I had the proper life. And was that what you wanted? Noah asked. She considered the question. I thought it was, until Frederick, my fiancé, showed his true colors. He ended our engagement the moment my father was killed, and I was suspected of involvement. Said he couldn't be associated with a scandal. Her laugh was brittle, as if that was the real tragedy. Noah's voice was soft. His loss. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Piper found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by a force she couldn't name. For a heartbeat, it seemed Noah might close the distance between them. Then a twig snapped in the darkness, and they both froze. Noah was on his feet in an instant, gun drawn. Inside, he whispered urgently.
Now.
Piper hurried into the house, heart pounding. Noah followed, extinguishing the lamps. Stay away from the windows, he instructed. I'm going to find Miguel. Noah. Piper caught his arm. Be careful. He covered her hand with his own. A brief, reassuring touch. Always am. After he slipped out, Piper stood in the darkened house, listening to the night sounds with new awareness. Every rustle could be an approaching enemy, every shadow a threat. She moved to the cabinet where Noah kept his guns and took out a revolver, checking that it was loaded as her father had taught her years ago. Minutes stretched into an hour with no sign of Noah or Miguel. Worry gnawed at Piper like a physical pain. Had the Hargroves ambushed them? Were they even now approaching the house, thinking her defenseless? A floorboard creaked upstairs. Piper froze, her breath catching. Someone was in the house. Moving as silently as possible, she positioned herself behind the door that led to the kitchen, revolver ready. Footsteps descended the stairs, slow and deliberate. A shadow moved across the floor, too tall to be Miguel, too broad to be Noah. Piper steadied her trembling hands, finger poised on the trigger. The figure stepped into view, and moonlight through the window illuminated the cruel features of Wade Hargrove, the eldest brother. In his hand gleamed a knife. Come out, wherever you are, little bird," he called softly. "No use hiding. Your cowboy friend and the Mexican are taking a little nap outside. It's just you and me now." Piper's mouth went dry with fear, but she forced herself to remain still, waiting for him to move past her hiding place. "You know, my brother Cole's taken quite a shine to you," Wade continued, moving further into the room. "Talks about your pretty face, how he's going to make you his once we collect that reward money. But accidents happen." He chuckled, a sound devoid of humor, especially to fugitives who resist arrest. The moment he passed her position, Piper stepped out, pressing the revolver to the back of his head. "Drop the knife," she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Wade went still. Well, the little bird has claws." Slowly, he raised his hands, but instead of dropping the knife, he suddenly spun, knocking her arm aside. The gun discharged with a deafening roar, the bullet going wide. Wade lunged for her, knife slashing. Piper stumbled backward, feeling a sharp sting as the blade sliced through her sleeve and into her arm. "I'm going to enjoy this," Wade snarled, advancing on her. Piper raised the gun again, but her injured arm betrayed her, the weapon wavering. Wade grinned, sensing victory. The report of another gun split the air, and Wade jerked, a look of surprise crossing his face before he crumpled to the floor. Behind him stood Noah, his expression coldly furious. "Piper." He rushed to her, eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Just my arm," she managed, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving her shaky. "He said you and Miguel were fine. Miguel's tied up their horses." Noah examined her arm, his touch gentle despite the tension radiating from him. "It's not deep, but it needs cleaning." As he tended her wound, Piper glanced at Wade's still form. "Is he?" "Yes." Noah's voice was flat. "And his brothers won't be far behind. We need to move." "Where?" "They'll just follow us." Noah's jaw set in a determined line. "Not if they can't find us. There's an old line shack up in the mountains, used by shepherders in the summer. Hard to find if you don't know where to look." He finished bandaging her arm. "Can you ride?" Piper nodded, though her arm throbbed painfully. "Yes."
Good.
Noah stood. "Pack only what you need. We leave in 10 minutes. The night was moonless as they rode away from the ranch, Miguel leading them on a circuitous route that involved crossing and recrossing streams to confuse any pursuit. They traveled in silence, alert for any sound that might indicate the other Hargrove brothers had discovered them. By dawn, they had reached the foothills, the terrain growing steeper and more rugged. Piper's arm ached, and exhaustion dragged at her, but she pressed on, determined not to slow their escape. Noah rode close beside her, occasionally reaching out to steady her when the trail grew particularly treacherous. It was mid-morning when they finally reached the line shack, a small, sturdy structure nestled in a grove of aspens. A small stream gurgled nearby, and the view across the valley was breathtaking. "We should be safe here for a while," Noah said as they dismounted. "Few people know about this place." Miguel unloaded supplies, while Noah helped Piper inside. The shack was simple, one room with a stone fireplace, a rough table and chairs, and a narrow bed pushed against the far wall. "You should rest," Noah told her, his concern evident. "Miguel and I will take care of things out here." Too tired to argue, Piper sank onto the bed, barely managing to remove her boots before sleep claimed her. When she awoke, The slant of light through the small window told her it was late afternoon. Her injured arm was stiff but less painful, and the smell of coffee and cooking meat made her stomach growl. Outside, she found Noah tending a small fire while Miguel cleaned his rifle nearby. Noah looked up as she approached, relief evident in his expression. "Feeling better?" Piper nodded. "Much, thank you." She sat on a log beside the fire. "What's our plan now?" Noah handed her a tin cup of coffee. "Miguel will ride to town tonight, see if there's any word from the marshal. In the meantime, we stay hidden." Miguel departed at dusk, leaving Piper and Noah alone at the isolated shack. They ate a simple dinner in companionable silence, the tension of the past days easing somewhat in the peaceful mountain setting. After dinner, they sat outside, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The night was cool but not cold, the air fragrant with pine and wildflowers. "It's beautiful here," Piper said softly. "So different from Boston." Noah nodded. "That's what Sarah used to say. She loved the mountains." "You must miss her very much." His gaze remained on the distant horizon. "Every day, but lately." He paused, seeming to search for words. "Lately I've been thinking that she wouldn't want me to live half a life. That maybe it's time to start looking forward instead of back." Piper's heart quickened at the implication in his words. "And what do you see, looking forward?" Noah turned to her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Possibilities I didn't think existed anymore." The air between them seemed to charge with unspoken feelings. Piper found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something more powerful than reason or caution. Noah's hand came up to gently cup her cheek. "Piper," he murmured, her name a question, and an answer all at once. Their lips met in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened, years of loneliness and longing finding expression in this connection. Piper felt as though something long dormant within her had suddenly awakened, flooding her with warmth and yearning. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, Noah rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't expect this," he admitted. "Didn't expect you." "Nor I you," Piper replied, her hands still resting on his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart. "But now I can't imagine." A gunshot shattered the moment, the bullet splintering within inches from their heads. Noah reacted instantly, pushing Piper down and drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. "Inside," he ordered, returning fire toward the darkness where the shot had originated. They scrambled into the shack, Noah bolting the door behind them. "Stay low," he instructed, moving to the window to peer out cautiously. "How did they find us?" Piper whispered, fear gripping her anew. "Must have followed our trail." Noah's expression was grim. "Or they were waiting for us to lead them to you." More shots rang out, bullets thudding into the thick log walls of the shack. Noah returned fire judiciously, conserving ammunition. "I count 2 of them," he said. "Cole and the middle brother, Lester. They'll wait us out," Piper realized, "or set fire to the shack." Noah nodded grimly. "That's their style. But they've got one problem." "What's that?" His smile was wolfish. "They're up against a former Pinkerton who knows these mountains better than they do." He moved to a corner of the shack and lifted a trapdoor hidden under a rug. "Root cellar. It connects to a tunnel the shepherders used during Apache raids. Leads out to a ravine about 50 yards east." Hope flared in Piper's chest. "We can escape." "You can," Noah corrected. "I'll keep them occupied. Make them think we're both still here." "No." Piper gripped his arm. "I won't leave you to face them alone." Noah's expression softened. "Piper, listen to me. Miguel should be back with help by morning. I just need to hold them off until then. And if something goes wrong? If Miguel doesn't make it back?" Tears threatened as she confronted the possibility of losing this man who had come to mean so much to her in such a short time. Noah cupped her face in his hands. "Then, at least you'll be safe. That's what matters most to me now." "No," Piper said firmly. I've spent my whole life having others decide what matters most. Not this time. She straightened her shoulders. We stay together. Find another way. For a moment, Noah looked like he might argue. Then something shifted in his expression, respect, perhaps, or recognition of a will as stubborn as his own.
All right.
Together, they formulated a new plan quickly. Using the tunnel, they would both slip out to the ravine, then circle back to approach the Hargroves from behind. The element of surprise might give them the advantage they needed. The tunnel was low and narrow, forcing them to crawl through damp earth and roots. Piper's injured arm protested, but she gritted her teeth and pushed on, following Noah's lead. After what seemed an eternity, they emerged into the cool night air of a small ravine, sheltered by large boulders and pine trees. This way, Noah whispered, leading her along the ravine, and then up a steep incline that would bring them around behind the Hargroves' position. They moved as silently as possible, freezing whenever a twig snapped or a stone dislodged. The moon had risen, casting just enough light to see by while still providing shadows for cover. Finally, they reached a position overlooking the clearing where the shack stood. Two figures crouched in the tree line opposite, occasionally firing at the silent building. Still think they're inside. One voice drifted up. Gotta be, another replied. No way out except past us. Noah positioned himself carefully, rifle aimed. When I fire, run for those rocks to the right, he instructed Piper. I'll cover you, then follow. She nodded, heart pounding as she prepared to move. Noah took careful aim and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the mountains, followed immediately by a cry of pain. The second Hargrove spun, firing wildly in their direction as Piper sprinted for the rocks. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet, but she reached cover safely. Noah fired twice more, then ran to join her, bullets splintering bark from trees as he passed. He slid in beside her, breathing hard. Got Lester in the shoulder, he reported. But Cole's still out there, and he's no fool. What now? Piper asked, clutching her revolver. We need to, Noah began, but a voice cut him off. Blackwood. Cole Hargrove called from somewhere in the darkness. I know it's you out there. Send out the girl, and you might live to see morning. Not happening, Hargrove. Noah shouted back. Have it your way, Cole replied. But know this Wade's dead, Lester's hurt, and it's all on your head. I'm going to take my time with both of you when I catch you. And I will catch you. Noah and Piper exchanged glances, both recognizing the deadly intent in Cole's voice. This was no longer about reward money, or even justice, it was personal. We need to get to higher ground, Noah whispered. There's an outcropping about 100 yards up that slope. Good defensive position. They began moving carefully from rock to rock, using the scattered moonlight and shadows to their advantage. The night had grown colder, their breath visible in the mountain air. They were halfway to the outcropping when a shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off stone inches from Piper's head. Noah pulled her down just as more shots followed. He's got us pinned, Noah muttered. Must have circled around. Piper peered through the darkness, trying to spot their attacker. There, she whispered, pointing to a movement among the trees to their left. Noah followed her gaze, then nodded. Good eyes. I'll draw his fire. When he shoots at me, you take the shot. Noah, you can do this, he assured her. Remember what I taught you about breathing and squeezing, not pulling. Before she could protest further, Noah darted from cover, zigzagging toward another boulder. As predicted, Cole fired at him, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating his position. Piper steadied her revolver, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The gun bucked in her hand, and she heard a satisfying yelp of pain. You got him, Noah called, firing again to keep Cole pinned down. They used the advantage to make it to the outcropping, a natural fortress of stone that provided shelter on 3 sides. From this position, They could see the approach from any direction. "Now we wait," Noah said, checking their remaining ammunition. "Dawn's only a few hours away. Miguel should be back with help by then." They settled in to wait, huddled together for warmth, guns ready. Occasionally, they heard movement below, but no more shots came. Either Cole was being cautious, or his wound was worse than they'd thought. As the hours passed, Piper found herself drifting despite the danger, exhaustion taking its toll. Noah's arm around her shoulders kept her anchored, his warmth and solid presence a comfort in the cold mountain night. "Stay with me," he murmured when her head drooped against his shoulder. "Talk to me. Tell me about your dreams, what you want, after all this is over." Piper roused herself. "Dreams? I haven't allowed myself to dream since my father died. Just survival. And before that?" She thought back to the young woman she'd been in Boston, with all her naive hopes. "I wanted to travel, see places I'd only read about in books. Maybe teach, like your Sarah." Noah's arm tightened around her. "You still can do all of that and more." "What about you?" she asked. "What do you dream of now?" His voice was soft in the darkness. "Things I never thought I'd want again. A home that's more than just a place to sleep. Family. Someone to share sunsets and sunrises with." The simple honesty of his words touched Piper deeply. "Noah," a noise from below interrupted her, the unmistakable sound of horses approaching. Noah tensed, rifle ready. "That's either Miguel with help or more of Hargrove's men," he whispered. They waited in tense silence as riders came into view in the pre-dawn light, 5 mounted figures approaching the shack. Relief flooded through Piper as she recognized Miguel's stocky form among them, along with men wearing badges. "It's the marshal," she breathed. Noah sagged slightly, the tension of the night finally showing in his face. "Let's go meet them before they start shooting at shadows." They made their way carefully down the slope, Noah firing a warning shot into the air and calling out to identify themselves. The marshal's party wheeled in their direction, weapons raised until they recognized Noah Blackwood. A tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest rode forward. "Miguel said we'd find you up here. Where's Miss Calloway?" "Right here, Marshal," Piper replied, stepping into view. The marshal nodded in satisfaction. "Good to see you safe, madam. We've been looking for you since Denver." "What happened?" Noah asked. "Why the delay?" The marshal's face darkened. "Hargrove had friends in the telegraph office. Our messages were intercepted. We only figured it out when no confirmation came back from Sheriff Mason." He glanced around. "Speaking of Hargroves, Miguel says you've had trouble with them." "Wade's dead back at my ranch," Noah reported. "Lester's wounded, probably headed for the nearest doctor. And Cole." He looked toward the trees where they'd last seen the youngest Hargrove. "Right here, Blackwood." Everyone turned to see Cole Hargrove stumbling from the tree line, blood staining his side, his gun trained unsteadily on Piper. "Drop it, Hargrove," the marshal ordered, his own weapon leveling. Cole's face was a mask of hatred. "She's dead anyway. So's her pet Cowboy." Everything happened in a blur, Cole's finger tightening on the trigger, Noah lunging to shield Piper, the marshal and his deputies firing as one. Cole jerked backward under the impact of multiple bullets, his own shot going wide as he collapsed. In the sudden silence that followed, Piper clung to Noah, her heart racing. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." Noah held her close, his arms solid and sure around her. "Yes," he agreed. "That part is over." The journey back to town was anticlimactic after the drama of the night. The marshal's men dealt with Cole's body while Noah, Piper, and Miguel rode alongside the marshal himself. He explained that with the Hargrove gang eliminated, Piper was free to go wherever she wished. "The charges against you have been officially dropped," he told her. "Your father's estate awaits your instructions, and there are several newspapers interested in your story." Piper nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere, specifically on the quiet cowboy riding beside her, whose life had become so unexpectedly entwined with hers. Back in Redemption Creek, Rebecca wept with relief to see her brother safe, hugging Piper as if she were already family. The town buzzed with the news of the Hargrove gang's demise, many residents stopping by the boarding house to express their support or simply to gawk at the Eastern lady who had survived such an ordeal. That evening, as Piper sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset, Noah joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Marshall says you're free to leave whenever you're ready," he said, settling beside her. "I imagine Boston has a lot to offer that Redemption Creek doesn't." Piper accepted the coffee, studying his profile in the fading light. "Are you asking if I'm leaving, Noah?" He kept his gaze on the horizon. "Just stating facts." "Then here's another fact," she said quietly. "I have no desire to return to Boston. Too many memories, none of them good anymore." Noah turned to her then, something like hope kindling in his eyes. "Where will you go?" Piper set her coffee down and reached for his hand. "I was thinking I might stay. This town has grown on me, and there are possibilities here that I'd like to explore." His fingers tightened around hers. "Piper, I'm not a wealthy man. My ranch is small, my prospects limited. I can't offer you the kind of life you had in Boston." "Good," she replied firmly, "because that life nearly suffocated me. What you can offer is far more valuable: honesty, courage, a chance to build something real." She met his gaze steadily. "If that's what you want to." Noah set his own cup aside and took both her hands in his. "When Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over forever, that I'd never again feel anything but grief and anger." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Then you came stumbling into town with a bullet in your shoulder and fire in your eyes, and something woke up inside me." "Noah," Piper whispered, her heart full. "I love you, Piper Calloway," he said simply.
Stay.
"Not just in Redemption Creek, but with me. At the ranch. Help me make it a home again." Tears blurred Piper's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she managed. "Yes to all of it." His kiss was gentle yet profound, a promise of all they might become together. 3 weeks later, Piper stood in the small church of Redemption Creek, wearing a simple white dress that Rebecca had helped her make. Noah waited at the altar, looking uncomfortable but handsome in his best suit, Miguel and Sheriff Mason standing beside him as witnesses. As she walked down the aisle on the marshal's arm, he had insisted on giving her away, having appointed himself her unofficial guardian. Piper reflected on the strange and winding path that had led her here. From privileged daughter to fugitive to bride, all in the space of a few months. Noah's face as he watched her approach told her everything she needed to know about the rightness of this choice. His eyes, once shadowed by loss, now shone with a love so palpable it seemed to fill the small church. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, Rebecca let out a watery laugh from the front pew. "If anyone does, they'll have the whole town to answer to," she declared, prompting chuckles from the assembled townspeople who had taken Piper into their hearts. The vows were simple, the kiss that sealed them profound. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife, Piper felt a sense of homecoming she'd never experienced before, not in her father's grand Boston house, not anywhere in her previous life. The celebration afterwards spilled from the church to the town square, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army. As twilight fell, Noah drew Piper away from the festivities toward the edge of town. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her to where 2 horses waited. They rode in companionable silence as the first stars appeared, following a path that led to a ridge overlooking the valley. Noah helped her dismount, then guided her to the edge. Below, his ranch sprawled in the gathering darkness, windows glowing with welcoming light. But Noah pointed beyond it, to a cleared area near the stream where the foundation of a new structure was taking shape. Our new house, he explained. Bigger than the old one. Room for a proper library. His arms slipped around her waist. Room for a family when we're ready. Piper leaned into him, overcome with emotion. It's perfect. They stood together, watching the moon rise over the mountains, the future stretching before them like the vast western sky full of promise, adventure, and a love neither had thought to find again. Remember that day you rode into town? Noah murmured against her hair. When you were finally conscious enough to talk, you told me it was too late for justice, too late for a normal life. Piper smiled at the memory. And you said, not if you still want something else. Noah turned her to face him, his expression serious yet tender. I didn't know then what that something else might be. But I think we've found it, don't you? In answer, Piper reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that spoke of hardship endured and happiness rediscovered. Yes, she whispered. We've found it together. Their kiss, witnessed only by the stars and the ancient mountains, sealed a promise that had begun with a gunshot and a chance encounter in a dusty frontier town, a promise of love that had overcome the past and now reached confidently toward the future. 1 year later, Piper sat on the porch of their new home, a leather-bound journal open on her lap. Inside, she had been recording the story of their unusual courtship, determined that future generations would know how their family began. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. Noah's cattle herd had expanded, and Piper had started a small school for the children of nearby ranchers and the town's residents. 3 times a week, she rode into Redemption Creek to teach in a room above the general store, returning home each afternoon to the warmth of Noah's smile and the life they were building together. As she rode, Piper heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Noah riding in, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Her heart still quickened at the sight of him, a reaction that showed no signs of diminishing with time. He dismounted in one fluid motion, patting his horse's neck before securing it to the hitching post. Spotting her on the porch, he smiled that special smile he reserved only for her. Riding again? He asked as he climbed the steps, bending to kiss her. She confirmed against his lips. Just finished the part where you proposed. Noah chuckled, settling beside her on the porch swing. Romanticizing it, no doubt. As I recall, I was dusty, exhausted, and not particularly eloquent. You were perfect, Piper corrected, closing the journal. How is town? Good. Sheriff sends his regards. Oh, and Rebecca says to remind you about the church social on Sunday. He stretched his long legs out, relaxing after the day's work. Got a letter from the marshal, too. Says the last of the Hargrove associates have been rounded up in Arizona territory. Piper nodded, grateful for the news, yet no longer fearful. The Hargroves were part of a past that grew more distant with each passing day. I have news, too, she said, setting aside her journal. Noah raised an eyebrow, waiting. Piper took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. We'll need that extra bedroom sooner than we thought. For a moment, Noah stared at her in confusion. Then understanding dawned, and his expression transformed into one of wonder and joy. A baby, he whispered. You're sure? Piper nodded, tears of happiness pricking her eyes. Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. Around Christmas, he thinks. Noah gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. A family, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Our family. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Piper Blackwood nestled in her husband's embrace, surrounded by the life they had forged together from the ashes of their separate pasts. From the unlikeliest of beginnings, a wounded fugitive and a grief-hardened cowboy had grown a love that defied expectations and healed old wounds. And as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Piper thought of all the journeys that had led her here across mountains and deserts, through danger and despair, and knew with absolute certainty that she had finally, truly found her home.